All right. Well, what a great day so far. Great morning. I am super excited for this final session. This is bringing together, PT. Again, we got Eric Weber on. We got Rick Riley coming on, towards the end to cover up some things, industry-wide stuff, which is really neat. But I am so pumped to have Dr. Jennifaye Brown, 35 years plus as a clinician, community researcher, teacher, focused in stroke, neurorehabilitation. I mean, owner of JVB Physical Therapy in Charleston, big contributor to Lower Extremity Review magazine, and just an awesome, all-around, phenomenal woman. So I'm grateful to have you. It's a real honor to have you on board.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you and I could see you.
All right.
So we are just, we're going to move on. I think the first session, we got Eric, you're going to lead it off again on functional rehab strategies. And then we're going to go into Jennifaye with modifying carbon composites. And then we're going to close it out with Rick Riley, another personal friend of mine and everybody for, 3 decades. So I'm going to move us backstage and oh, there he is. Rick is actually popping on. I am just awesome. He's down in South Carolina as well right now, as a matter of fact.
Right.
So, all right, my friend. There, we'll bring him up real quick. There he is. He actually was able to log in without issues. I don't know, Rick. We did some training or what?
Sorry about that. Old school guy.
Well, really grateful to have you. Everybody, that's Rick Riley, personal friend of mine for, I don't even know, 3 decades, media past president of AOPA, and just a wealth of knowledge and experience unique to this AFO conversation, 30 plus years in the O&P space. So I'm excited to see his presentation, but we're going to move everybody backstage and get Eric kicked off. All right, go ahead, my friend.
All right. Glad you made it, Rick. Dr. Brown, looking forward to this. I'm sorry you all have to hear me again, but I am honored to do so. And this has become I think a passion project of mine over the last couple of decades. I'm a prosthetist orthotist and not a therapist. However, I work with many therapists, and they've combined, and we all have combined efforts to hopefully create some useful information centered around strategies for using composite AFOs in your practice and helping your patients move forward. I've got a little bit of philosophy and a few strategies, as well as some gait training and outcomes collection that I'd like to go through. So once again, I am a salaried employee of Hanger Clinic. That's really my only financial disclosure, and I won't be representing any manufacturer or vendor. This is pure clinical experience married with the scientific literature. So everything I really want to share with you today rests really on one central thought. And this is a paradigm shifting from using an AFO simply to protect and restrict the limb in movement. We want to use the composite materials themselves to use the orthosis as a tool to restore normal or symmetrical movement patterns. So that's a shift, I think, particularly treating with AFOs. The classical model that we've all lived with is, here's your deficit, here's a brace to manage it. But I think what I'm thinking about and what's really moving through the healthcare world right now is, you have a deficit, here's a device that we're going to use clinically, systematically, progressively, to get you closer to where we all collectively are hoping to share a goal towards. And I've broken out strategies into 5 strategies and gait training into 4. So if it's just, it's a way that my brain thinks in buckets and things. So first strategy is using the composites as an energy return tool. So this is a restoration of propulsion at the end of step, at the end of stance, using materials in a mixed way or a different way to tune the stiffness and the rigidity. This is a choice and it's a progression, so it's not a static decision. 3, preventing disuse atrophy, keeping the neuromuscular system engaged at all time. Volume training, this is more steps per day, building community ambulation and its capacity. And then finally, the 5th strategy is really matching the device to the patient that's most appropriate. And that's not, again, a static decision once, but it is a changing thing. None of these are isolated in and amongst themselves, but they do work together. So taking a little bit closer look briefly on each one, let's start with some data and use energy return as our first strategy. This is a distillation of a number of systematic reviews and some other things, but compared to ambulating without an AFO, carbon composite can give you a 9 to 15% reduction in the energy cost of walking, 12% improvement in 6-minute walk test, 10% increase in walking speed, and a 10% increase in stride length. So for a patient post-limb salvage, post-stroke, recovering from peripheral nerve injury, that difference, I think, in energy economy really determines whether or not they can actively participate in rehab. So mechanisms like the spring-like behavior of composites, where the strut loads in stance, and specifically at the end of stance, restoring a symmetrical stride and an increased length of the stride. You're essentially restoring, a mechanical analog to reduced calf muscle strength. Strategy 2, the tuning of the stiffness. And I do want to make sure that everyone's aware that it's not the same as just choosing a different brace all the time. Sometimes it's building it in a different way. So these composites can be made or adjusted to specific stiff values. And that can be titrated, the stiffness can, throughout their rehab and recovery. More support maybe early on, and maybe when strength and motor control is lessened, all the way to a little bit more progressively reducing some of that stiffness as muscle strength returns. So the material choice becomes the strategy. The 3rd strategy, atrophy prevention and disuse. When you do immobilize a joint or over support a limb, the muscles stop firing at functional levels. I think we all know this when a joint is in a cast or a very rigid AFO or something, the muscles are not allowed to move through their normal range of motion. The flexible part of a strut is compliant enough to continue firing that muscle and contributing to normal range of motion and activation. So you're augmenting function without replacing it entirely. So the patient's still working and moving themselves through normal range of motion, but with an assist. So preventing atrophy and disuse. Strategy 4 is the volume training. And I think this is a little bit underappreciated because motor learning requires, at any meaningful level, repetition over and over and over and over and over again. The literature does talk about over 10,000 repetitions to really do anything. So that doesn't really happen in 3 times a week PT for 30 minutes. This is concerted effort at home and throughout the process. So what a composite AFO does for you is making walking less effortful. It makes it easier to walk. So increasing both the capacity and the patient's willingness to walk, especially outside of the clinical setting, get them into something that isn't a flat concrete floor with parallel bars. They walk more, they practice more, the volume compounds on compounds on compounds. So what do you get if the patient is less fatigued at the end of any specific walking task? More steps per day. 5th strategy is matching. This is the part that you start before step 1 and change at the end of step 5, because not every patient benefits from the same device or the same device strategy. So here's how I think about it. Post limb salvage, maybe a young active person, rigid struts, full sports, reintegration. Post fusion, energy return to compensate for lost motion. Foot drop from a neurological or surgical cause, leaf springs for swing face clearance was probably just fine. Distal muscle weakness, we're looking at a progressive stiffness and a reduction of that stiffness over time protocol. And high volume community ambulators, off-the-shelf composites are probably fine to reduce energy costs during swing at scale. And many of my patients have some sort of combination of these based on activity. So matching device to the patient appropriately. And before I switch gears to gait training protocols, let's at least orient a little bit on who we're treating and what we're aiming for, at least biomechanically. Primary etiologies for this approach are limb salvage and trauma, post-stroke, traumatic brain injury, peripheral nerve injury, and neurodegenerative diseases. Across all these populations, I think the goal is still to restore or approximate the energy conserving mechanisms of normal gait. What do I mean by that? On the right-hand side of the slide, I put the 3 sort of principal theories of energy conservation that we use. And we're focused with these etiologies, not always in the same energy conservation model, if that makes sense. So I would use for limb salvage and trauma more of a longer step, symmetrical stride, inverted pendulum model. The body is vaulting over a fixed point, longer and stronger. Post-stroke and maybe some peripheral nerve injuries, they're not able to do that. They can't really charge a strut the same way. So we back off some of the stiffness, and now we might be centered on keeping the center of mass centralized. So preventing hips from swaying and trunks from swaying, small movements centered around center of mass. And neurodegenerative diseases are always tricky, and finding the right methodology is tough. So training to the limitations of that patient, using selective muscle control, training to fire muscles only as needed and when specific muscles can be retrained. All of this needs to be reinforced, be repetitive, be intense, and do it in a way that they still want to do it with you and not give up. All right, so the back half of my remarks are, I think, the subject that we're all kind of thinking about when we think of rehab strategies, and that's really just gait training. The protocol that we developed has 4 steps matched to the care setting. Step 1, pre-orthosis training. This is just foundational work, mobility, motor control, finding the primary deficits, and we're not even using an AFO at this point. Step 2, we introduced their device to them. We're confirming that it's the right thing for them, that it fits. Spend a lot of time just having the patient put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off, over and over again, so they're comfortable with their shoes and how it fits and how it's supposed to fit. Move into quiet standing, and this is a trust exercise, making sure that as you load and move into the AFO, it's got you and it's performing the way it should, and the alignment is appropriate. And not until step 4 do we start walking. We can move towards a goal of reducing assistive devices, not a primary goal, but the care setting makes a difference, whether you're starting in the acute care setting, post-op, inpatient, all the way to maybe a home health might transition between a step 3 and into outpatient rehab, where you're primarily focused on walking. So I'll just sort of zoom in a little bit on each of those. Before we ever even talk about the type of AFO we want to introduce, we need to understand tissue and joint environment. Is there a contracture anything limiting? Is there tissue quality, skin integrity problems, scars? What's the baseline? So we need to know kind of what we're going to be targeting next. In step one, we've identified the deficit, the primary, not the secondary, any contractures, mobility first, then motor control. So this is based on the pattern of a reset, reinforce, reload. So it's introducing mobility proximally where we're fixing distal joints, and that moves, once we lock up something, we have to translate that motion somewhere. So this is transfers and tone management, anatomical alignment, range of motion limitations. This speaks directly to the composite design. If they have a history of failed orthoses or problems, we're doing a little bit of pre-gait training and posture work before we even stand. Isometric exercises are great here, especially where active range of motion is limited. Between the PT, the physical therapist, and the orthotist, we should be actively communicating at this stage what potentially each are thinking. We do at this point want to keep their body as upright as possible, so we tend to use higher sticks rather than crutches. So trekking poles where elbows and wrists can be held at a body close position. And as we build that mobility through motor control, and then we can start building strength. The early steps 2 and 3, we've put the device on, patient is in quiet standing. What we're looking for, a couple of things about, is the heel seated properly in the AFO. Does it look like the load path is logical and lines up with line of progression? Are they weight bearing symmetrically or unloading the affected side? Are they leaning too far this way or that way? How does the shoe fit? This kind of predates anything that we're going to actually do, including the composite material itself. Too thick, too thin, too stiff, too flexible. Practice putting on and off again, standing up, communicating any alignment rationale to the patient, especially some of the more rigid devices where we're actually asking them to relax their knee. And if there is a weakness, that's a strange position to be in. Standing first and then loading. So don't push walking if they're not comfortable at that point. Even weight distribution. So we use a lot of biofeedback mechanisms, tape on floors, triggers, cones, things like that. Matching center of mass over their base of support. And using primary muscle groups, but substitutions are fine. If their hip flexor is weak, but they advance their limb through a combination of hip elevators like quadratus lumborum or abs and glute medius, something to get them forward, fine, train to that. But cue when necessary. So you're loading through initial contact over and over, smooth rollover at mid-stance, and strut loading to initiate swing phase. This is also a good time to do some exercise progression. And this follows a mat-based hierarchy. So on the mat, we can start with supine and then move to sideline, prone, then to a quadruped position, tall kneeling, and then half kneeling. And within those are several stretches, either bridges. You're moving your body to the other side, transferring, right hand goes to left, et cetera, et cetera. So these are stretches, not really strengthening exercises at this point, but again, we're reinforcing positioning that is correct. Oops. Assuming it's safe, you can see the patient in a real clinical environment. Not really parallel bars necessarily. We do want the patient ambulating somewhat in the environment where they live or are similar to. It's nice though in the beginning to make sure there's nothing they're going to trip on or anything. Video is essential for me. My eyes are just not fast enough to keep up as you train to see gait deviations and limitations. So moving from static then to dynamic loading, with the video focusing on extensor chain normalization of terminal stance. You can enhance the weight bearing side by single limb raises, marching, that sort of a thing. We encourage trunk rotation and full arm swing, and not so much of a guarded position, aiming for even strides, keeping loading on the device, unload it. We should force some more weight bearing through the AFO, and we can do that using targeted stepping, mirrors, cones, repetitive treadmill walking, finally some strength building with resistive walking, walking backwards, agility stepping, and ascending and descending ramps and stairs. We do then move to a balance progression. This involves turning your head while walking, closing your eyes, weight shifting, walking on things that are not flat, foams, grass, gravel, keeping a narrow base of support as well as a wide base of support, single limb standing, tandem stance. And then we like to think of a reduction of assistive devices as a progression, but something that shouldn't be necessarily rushed. So as you move through parallel bars to a walker, then into maybe crutches, a quad cane, a single cane, and ultimately, if it's you in the goal setting, nothing. So now at the end of this rehab strategy, we have the right AFO on, we have an amazing physical therapist, and it looks like they're doing really well. But how do we know? Besides they look like they're walking better, well, we collect outcomes. This is an ME scorecard that Hanger Clinic uses to visualize outcomes that are sent to the patient automatically. The left panel shows patient's mobility from the O-Pro-M patient self-report measure as a percentile against all lower limb orthosis users. In this example, the patient moved from the 9th percentile to the 44th. You can see between March and July, and that's a clinically meaningful change for the right AFO. The right panel benchmarks that against similar patients in their own cohort demographic. So same device category, same clinical characteristic, upper motor neuron lesion in this case, same age. And then the bottom is a subset of the PEQ on satisfaction and quality of life. And that is scored from a 1 to 10. And so these tachometers sort of track mobility plus quality of life and satisfaction. It's a good way that we can print out, give to the patient, and they're seeing, at least visually, how they're doing. We collect these outcomes at initial evaluation, after acclimation in a 2 to 4 week time generally, and then 6 months thereafter. So at least the O-Pro-M, the PROMIS pain interference scores, a fall history, and outside of the initial evaluation, we just repeat those for any of our longitudinal data. Almost done. Every device category does have limitations. As we talked about earlier this morning, off the shelf, pre-made is limited. You can conform it, add it, grind it a little bit, but it's not custom fabricated alignment. So for some patients, it's great. For others, it's wrong. Custom rigid thermoplastics restricting motion is good for some, good containment, but not great for propulsion or dynamics. Dorsal leaf springs, swing phase clearance only. It doesn't really do much for stance. Articulated when motion is started, but again, not great for dynamics. So we move into, that's when the composite dynamic properties come into play. So those device limitations are there. Subjectively, limitations on home environment, what they work on, what they walk on, what their goals are, and objectively their mobility and strength limitations, balance, gait quality, and endurance. So bottom line, just confirm that the device is appropriate every time you see them, because it changes. Material choice and design is the way to move through the patient's progression, not the other way around. So in summary, train to the limitations, identify and address the primary deficit and not the compensatory symptom. Focusing on the barriers, environment, strength, and balance. Use video. It's faster than you are. Encourage device loading, trust building, weight shifting, then move into walking. Ensure that the device is appropriate every single time, right material, right stiffness. Maintain physical therapy, orthotist communication throughout the continuum of care. This is a collaborative effort for sure. So functional rehab and these strategies with carbon composites is really a tiered, and in this case, an evidence-based system using the material properties, energy storing and return, and its variable stiffness as a therapeutic tool, not just the device. So I will, Rich, turn it back to you.
Once again, knocked it out of the park. Great way to set off this conversation. I think you set it up perfectly for what Dr. Jennifaye Brown is going to be bringing. So I'm going to bring her up to stage, and you stop sharing, Eric.
Yep.
And then I'll throw you back, and then bring you back up during the Q&A. It's actually afternoon now, so we have good afternoon, Jennifaye. How are you?
I am wonderful.
Good. I love it. 35 years clinician, teacher focused in stroke neurorehabilitation across the continuum of care. Current owner of JVB in Charleston, South Carolina. So I'm going to let you rock and roll, and we'll see you in a little bit.
And can you see my slides?
Yep, it looks great.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, Eric, thank you so much for that information. When I have to teach neuro rehab and gait training with and without ankle foot orthoses, I may add you as my sidekick. I appreciate what you have said. I want to reinforce a couple of things. You are absolutely right. We are not documenting evidence-based on how the AFO is benefiting the client. And I just want people to know that in 2025, I published a paper called Quantifying Ankle Foot Orthosis Use, Fit, and Function via Outcome Measures. And it was astounding to know that we as therapists are not using an outcome measure post-stroke to measure the effectiveness and the efficiency of ankle foot orthosis. Well done with prosthetics, but not for individuals with stroke. This is my disclosure and disclaimer. And our outline, benefits and optimizations for stroke diagnoses, key examples of optimization, which you have already heard, and I'm going to bring a physical therapy lens to it, rehabilitation at the activity versus the body structure function level, and we'll close out with some summary of key points. So you've already seen this information. What's critical is that these carbon fiber AFOs absorbs energy during deformation. But the problem is with stroke, based on the lesion location, not just in the motor strip, but in the sensory area, the parietal lobe, there is inefficient push-off, which you need to increase the speed of gait. There are three critical things that happen. The foot is in plantar flexion 20 degrees, the knee is passively flexed 40 degrees, and you have metatarsal toe hyperextension at 60 degrees. But with these rigid plates, you can't often get those three key things. And this is why I like the Trulife carbon fiber AFO, because if you all could tell, you can shave down the forefoot portion of that toe plate. And they had adjustable strapping in order for the tibia to move forwards and backwards on that shaft. The last thing is the research shows that there's an immediate effect on decreasing the energy cost of walking, because where you fix a joint someplace in the body, another joint has to take over and the muscles that cross that joint. But how do we do that efficiently? And the carbon fiber AFO works for some people in the stroke population, but not for everybody, depending on that lesion location. So I really look at my clients. Which one of these am I going to choose? If they have a concentric problem with pulling the foot up in swing phase, I'm going with the posterior portion. But if they have eccentric, gastroc soleus, posterior tibialis, that plantaris, don't forget about that muscle, In the posterior compartment, I'm going with an anterior shaft. But with stroke, there is often a problem with allowing the tibia to move anterior, posterior, and internally and externally. And so I have an issue often with these rigid straps. And so I have to think about, how is the muscle working isometrically, concentrically, and eccentrically in the anterior, lateral, and posterior compartments? And then how am I going to allow that movement to occur during stance phase versus swing phase? And I have found that I need to use tension straps based on the muscle firing and whether it's working isometrically, concentrically, or eccentrically, and in which phase of gait. So that's one thing I have to do to optimize movement. And the last thing, I have to look at eliminating the foot portion that prevents push off. And that goes with grinding down that foot plate for the carbon fiber AFO. But we've forgotten something, because spasticity has already been mentioned this morning, and tone. How do we control that in the lower extremity? And maybe those clients aren't always suitable for carbon fiber AFO. Well, I look at how tone and spasticity are impacted based on the position of the body. And so I may have to add something that's been known in the literature, known as a DAFO. You hear about it in peds, but not in adults. It is a dynamic ankle foot orthosis in which it's a volume ankle support, a plastic. It's contoured to the sole of the foot. It accommodates the movement between the hind foot, the midfoot, and the forefoot. The fibers of the plastic are thinned and thick based on weaknesses of the muscle. And so I have been using that concept in my adult individuals with stroke with a carbon fiber AFO. So back in the day, I had to make these on my own. But before introducing those, I said, what is it that I can do to maximize the use of the carbon fiber AFO as is? So first of all, most of my clients had weakness in the tibialis anterior, pulling it up during swing phase. And so I had to say, what am I going to sacrifice? I had to first turn that dorsiflexor on in closed chain prior to getting to standing. I had to get closed chain dorsiflexion during the horizontal movement of transitioning into stand. I needed these tension straps. So I started collecting from a variety of vendors based on muscle weakness, isometric, concentric, and eccentric, which band I am going to use, and I match the tension of the strap with the weakness and the ability to generate force of the muscle group. So you can see here in sitting, for efficient sit to stand during the horizontal component, you got to get the ankle behind the knee. You can't do that when the tibia is fixed to the shaft and there's a rigid strap. That was the first thing I did. The second thing I did is I started making these DAFOs on my own. All right. I used different thickness plastics. We would mold them to the ankle. They need stability first, but I always use a tension strap. Notice how my tension strap is either horizontal or diagonal. The thickness of that strap is different, and the tension that it gives is different. Notice I have no full plates. I only used a full plate with a toe spreader if my client displayed clawed toes. But the reason why they were displaying that is because they didn't have enough force to bring their tibia forward in closed chain using the tibialis anterior. So that was a compensatory strategy. Once I figured out a way to let them get their tibia forward in closed chain, the toe grasping stopped. And how did I do that? I used a tension strap at the right below the knee. So again, you have to look at multiple joints and focus on what's the primary problem. And from there, secondary issues will fix themselves usually. Again, you have to think of tone and spasticity and sensory issues with the stroke patient. This is not a pure motor problem. So over time, I use these with the carbon fiber AFO and the tension strap at the proximal portion. And what I've found is when people came to me with these carbon fiber AFOs, my first question to them is, what is it that you want to accomplish? All right. So we have to look at the primary diagnosis. So here is a modern version of what I would call the DAFO in black. All right. It's very rigid. It has a strap that's preventing any forward ankle movement. All right. But it also has limitations up the shaft where you see the back portion of that shaft where the white arrow is. It doesn't open up so that when we get forward movement of the tibia, the calf can expand and contract. That calf has the potential based on the position of the foot to get bigger and smaller as it works concentrically, all right, for push off, or eccentrically to allow the tibia to move over the ankle during the midfoot rocker. And the last thing is in yellow, the edge of the shaft, the medial and lateral portion, it may come too far anterior to allow the tibia to move. All right. And so you got to think is you want the tibia to internally rotate during pronation when you have your midfoot rocker. So how is the lateral and medial wall preventing that? Or maybe there's supination of the foot, which goes with tibia external rotation, and you may want to decrease that. So maybe the lateral wall needs to come a little bit further, but you have to allow for the tibia to move anterior posterior so that you can get from sit to stand and then get your body weight from behind you to in front of you during stance phase. So those are just 3 examples of what I could have possibly changed with this carbon fiber AFO to help this person. And she said she was having difficulty doing her exercises because her ankle was fixed. It needed the stability, but she found herself getting weaker up the chain. And you can look at the picture in the middle and notice that her calf has wasted away compared to her left one. You can just see that here in the picture. And so I worked with her and the orthotist to make some changes for this brace. And the first thing we had to do was get rid of the strap at the ankle that was blocking her forward movement. And we had to allow a more volume socket fit for ankle stability. And then we had allow the calf portion to expand and contract. And the Trulife brace is excellent for this because it has that layer of blue foam on the inside. As the calf expands and tracks more because it's increasing inside due to strength, then you can decrease the depth of that blue padding. And then allow a tension strap in the front to allow the tibia to come forwards and backwards. And I see a lot of this in the AFOs that I get from clients. They always have some type of P-light or foam insert between the anterior portion of the leg and the strap. That's because they keep hitting something rigid and it's painful. You give them a dynamic, elastic tension band that can go away. And another thing my clients say to me, they don't like the color of it. Why? If it was flesh tone, that would be fine. And most of them want to wear, especially the women, want to wear a dress and things like that in a different type shoe. And the brace just stands out. And they said if it could be less obtrusive in the look, they would be more apt to wear it. So this is a client of mine that came to me with the carbon fiber AFO, and we made the DAFO, and I made the changes. I took away the rigid strap. We made some changes to the forefoot plate because her foot is not flat like this with the toe up at the end. She was allowed to get that toe hyperextension. She could get her tibia forward. And it came to me, she was like, can I not just get rid of the carbon fiber AFO? And I thought about what I was told by Ed Barber, a CPO who trained me in Atlanta, Georgia. He said, you always want to give the least restrictive assistive device that allows the most function. So she went from having a DAFO model with a carbon to no carbon and just a DAFO model. And this is her walking in Madrid, Spain this spring. And because of her disease process, she wears an AFO on both feet. And we did a UBC model so she could really get that plantar flexion, that loading response. And then we can come forward, and she has a tension strap. And her forefoot plate, which she requested, is very flexible. She can roll right over that. And these are the shoes that she opts to wear. And she wears them with her dresses, her skirts, everything. And she is very, very happy. So, as I said, I made major significant changes to the carbon fiber AFO and adding that DAFO, that volume socket fitting sleeve to the ankle. But you just can't make the changes to the brace. You got to do some treatment interventions. And a lot of things that you're going to hear has already been said and well said by Eric. I'm just going to add a couple things, and I'm going to show you through video and explain some of these things. I work on the horizontal and the vertical component of sit to stand. And I use the TheraBand because in this movement, you want to be able to move forward, but control how the movement is occurring in that plane. And sometimes I move the TheraBand further away from the fulcrum point of the knee or the ankle based on what needs to happen. Just know when the foot is flexed, when the foot is flat on the ground, you can put your fingertip at the front of the dorsum of the crease, and that tibia fires up. If we are blocking that tibia, it doesn't have the potential to fire, that tibialis anterior. So don't forget the horizontal and the vertical component of sit to stand training prior to gait. Another functional activity is squatting. If in the carbon fiber AFO or my plastics, I put different tensions of TheraBand on the AFO and allow the muscles to work isometrically. You got to hold it. And then the tibia coming backwards has to move in a controlled manner against the resistance of the TheraBand. So you're getting isometric work, concentric work, and eccentric work, all of which is necessary during swing and stance phases of gait. Gait is highly eccentric, but very rarely are we training muscles of the leg eccentrically in closed chain and open chain. I do mid stance and terminal stance phase training because that is when you need the most stability at the ankle joint as the tibia moves forwards and backwards. All right. And we're missing that. And it takes time. So I have people take a step and lift the opposite leg in front of them. The higher they go, the more stance phase stability they need, and the higher they go in front of them as that person was putting their foot on the step stool. You have to control the calf muscles eccentrically. The lateral compartment comes on for the focus on pronation with controlling the tibia. All right, and that lateral compartment stabilizing the midfoot in that portion. And so stance phase, mid stance, and terminal stance is so important. And you do it through the opposite limb swing further in front of you and at a higher level. And then I look at things at the activity level in really loading the leg and getting closed chain dorsiflexion. And Eric already touched on this. You have to go through the developmental sequence, and we're not doing that. High kneel to half kneel. And so I spend a lot of time in closed chain dorsiflexion in a functional position. So look at this picture of me with my right ankle. Look how much dorsiflexion that is with knee flexion. Can your AFO allow this movement? If it's not hinged, it's easy to allow this movement. You give them a tension strap at the proximal leg, right below the knee, and you do not block the ankle with a strap here. You go from lateral to medial right at the end of the midfoot, navicular base of the the proximal portion of the first metatarsal. But I always have my clients go backwards and go down forward and come back up. You have to load the leg. It's so good for individuals with stroke because it gives them sensory information through proprioceptive input. And last, look at strengthening at the body structure function level with and without the AFO on. So in this first video, I'm just asking the person to pull their foot up. I'm just asking them to pull their foot up. Most clients cannot generate enough force to do that. So you have to do overload from someplace else in the body. Where you apply the resistance is key. And I decided to apply the resistance at the distal thigh. And look what happens, how that anterior tibialis turns on. If you were to have a strap going across the ankle in the AFO, you could not get that, right? So again, start training with your AFO on and off, all right? Open chain and closed chain. So in closing, the key points, we need to assess. You need to assess the compartment muscles, anterior, lateral, and posterior compartment, isometric, concentric, and eccentric, open chain and closed chain as it relates to gait. And then prioritize what is the major problem that you need to fix. How can you fix that problem with the AFO without compromising and causing secondary impairments? Use tension strapping, allowing the tibia to move forwards and backwards and internally and externally rotate as it needs to during closed chain and open chain portions of gait will help feed into improved muscle strength and improve the muscle strength isometrically, concentrically, and eccentrically. The third thing, because most individuals with stroke have a sensory problem on top of a motor problem, and I'm thinking proprioception, all right, kinesthetic awareness, they're going to need some support at that ankle, but you can't make it so rigid that it doesn't allow movement. That DAFO concept has a volume socket control with the different thicknesses of the plastic where you need support and stability, but where you may need dynamic mobility. And then rehabilitation. Make sure you're strengthening at the body structure function level and at the activity level. And I wrote my book based on my research with individuals with stroke, and this was to empower them. They didn't know the questions to ask the physical therapist about their braces or how to communicate what their perceptions of what their life is like and what they wanted to do. They didn't know what to ask the orthotist. And because I work with a team, I very rarely do I send my client to an orthotist without being at the first appointment. And before I even get to that first appointment, the orthotist has a thorough examination of the lower extremity and all the nuances based on the person, the task, and the environment in which they live. And so we come together as a team. And so this book has a chapter on what the physical therapist should be asked, what the orthotist should be asked, each of our roles, and what the person with the stroke should actually be doing for their success. And this is all based on my research and clinical experiences with orthotists and with stroke survivors. And those are the references. I am done. Thank you so much
You're awesome.
for the opportunity to speak.
You're awesome. Grateful to have you. Just a natural flow. And now we're going to go on to the next presenter. We have Rick Riley, my friend of 30 plus years. Media past president of AOPA, and just a tremendous amount of knowledge. How you doing, my man, down there in South Carolina?
Good. I hope you're doing good. Electricity at this house I'm at for the weekend went out 10 minutes ago, but hopefully everything's all good now.
I think you'll be straight. I'm going to load up your presentation.
Okay.
So one thing I do know about Rick, and I could say this in all honesty, he's not the most tech savvy individual you've ever met in your life. So I'm going to be sharing his screen, and we'll do a good workaround. But I'm going to bring it up right now, brother.
I'll start by saying, whenever you go to a national meeting, the kiss of death is being the speaker on a Saturday afternoon. But hey, I really appreciate this. Still looks like there's 160 plus people still online. I hope I'll make it worth your while. If I don't get through everything, the last slide has my contact information. And I promise you, I give an hour of my time to anybody. I love to talk to people. Rich will tell you I'm a talker.
The best.
But if you guys have any question at the end of this time period that I don't get around to, or you just want to add on, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. So
he's the best. He is absolutely.
You there, Rich? Oh, no. Rich, you there? Oh, nuts. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I just
Okay,
the screen will be up. Let me pull it back up.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. You got the screen.
Okay. So just wanted to say that, I've been working in the O&P industry since 1995. Spent 25 years at Townsend Design. We were predominantly a knee brace manufacturer. I am speaking today. I am a kind of semi-retired consultant. I surprisingly work with a bunch of startup companies, mostly international based outside of the US, that somehow find their way to this old gray hair guy. But I can introduce some of the people that they probably wouldn't meet for the first 10 years they're working in the industry, and try to provide support to them. You can go on to the next slide, Rich. Again, these comments are all mine. I've been on the board of AOPA. I'm not speaking on behalf of AOPA. I'm not speaking on behalf of any manufacturer. I'm just going to share my perspectives. And I'm really, I'm going to talk about manufacturers, and I'm going to talk about providers, and I'm going to talk about distributors, and just trying to really talk about this from a business perspective. You guys have heard the clinical side. You guys know way more than I'll never know. I obviously gleaned a lot over the years about gait and anatomy and bracing and things. But this is my sweet spot, is just talking about business stuff. And so, I'll start by telling you a little story. And I'm embarrassed to say that, I took over CEO at Townsend in 2003. And in the first 10, 15 years I was working in that role, 10, 12 years, I'd never even thought about whether we should enter the AFO market. We were knee braces, we did KFOs, but we weren't doing any type of composites AFOs. And I was at the ISPO meeting, 2015, Lyon, France, and had just done a presentation about OA bracing, gone to lunch with a colleague. And we're sitting there talking, and he mentioned this guy, this orthotist, who had this little workshop south of London, and he was making these amazing lightweight KFOs and AFOs. And I said, hey, I'd like to meet this guy. Get me his contact information. And I walked back into our exhibit booth, and there's this young guy, looked to be 30, 35 years old, and he's got one of our KFOs, and he's cranking it, and he's looking at it. And I walked over to him and said, hey, do you have any questions? And he turned and kind of looked at me and said, no, not really. And he had this British accent, and I was like, could it be possible that this is the guy? And so I said, hey, by the way, you wouldn't happen to be making lightweight KFOs south of London, would you? And he whipped his head and looked at me like, who are you? How would you know that? And we talked, and Long and short of it is, I went and saw him in his little workshop and realized, man, we'd be great if we could distribute his products. And then I realized there's no way that he'd be able to scale it. If there's just no way that he would have the cash flow to scale it. And so really realized we need to marry this guy. And so within the next year, we acquired his company, and that's what launched us into doing composite AFOs. And we got into doing both AFO, off the shelf and also custom. And, when we came on the scene, it was a mature marketplace. There was long-term players. And through our research, Allard was number one. I'd say Ottobock and Oster were duking it out number two. Trulife was certainly a player. There was others out there. And I, again, as we got into it and realized, wow, this is a much bigger market than we thought it was. And we also realized there's competitors in the space, but we happened to acquire a guy who his expertise in material science, and not just the structure and the strength characteristics, but it was the beauty of the products. They were just cosmetically flawless. And so we went from literally making 50 a month to 100 a month to 200 a month, 300, 400, 500. And so these long-term players that had established marketplace, suddenly everybody was having to react. And why I say that happenstance encounter I had with Tim in the summer of 2015 really had a transformational impact, was that everybody had to step up their game. Because when you start seeing new products come onto the market, and people start threatening your existing business, you have to react. And so we literally jumped in a 3-year period into a mature landscape and captured about 30+%. And so we were taking business away from everybody. So it was a fun time. And I'd say the most astounding thing that we did is we never were on back order in any point in that period. And that's a testimony to operations. And I'll talk about that, in the context of manufacturing, because manufacturing is not an easy thing. And I will say that I appreciate the manufacturers like Tuan, Townsend in the US still making products in the US market. And yet there's certain products that definitely can be made outside of the US and can be made sometimes less expensive because they don't have health benefits provided to employees and their pay scales are less and things like that. But, to me, price isn't everything. It's really who you align with. But there is such a diversity of products out on the marketplace, and there's a lot of great companies to buy from. And I'm not here to talk about any particular player out in the marketplace. But I always encourage people, get to know the companies you're working with. And of course, you get to know companies the more you buy direct from companies. If you're working through distributors, sometimes you have an arm's length relationship with manufacturers, but you see them at the shows. You may go to some of their education sessions. You may have sales reps that walk into your office, and there's a lot of things that that you can learn. And obviously, even like books like just talked about Brace Yourself. I mean, it's great to have those resources available to the consumers out there, the patients. And certainly, there's so much you can learn out on the internet today compared to when I started my career in 1983. And the greatest advancement in technology was I went from a manual typewriter to an electric typewriter that had a correction key, So, as Rich says, I've been around a long time. Manufacturing costs, product pricing, there's a lot of things that each company has to look at, and they have to find their own niche. I think that Townsend found its sweet spot because we were always a custom shop. We knew how to make quality products consistently, deliver them on time, deliver them at a fair price. The sales strategy we all do, we were fortunate to have a national sales team. Some companies only can afford to have regional people, or maybe people that are covering 4 or 5 states. But, we all try to do the best we can, and there's enough business to go around. So, I know that some providers out there, they like to buy from multiple different companies. I talk about the benefits of buying direct versus from a distributor. Hey, there's nothing wrong with distributors, and I'll talk about distributors in a couple of minutes. And I think there's a lot of good reason to buy from distributors. When you're buying direct from the manufacturer, I talk about things like achieving status. You get to know the people. If you get to know the administrators of the company, you get to know the clinical educators. And especially when you're working with custom products, if you have a problem, being able to talk to the person who's actually putting their hands on the brace, who's actually doing the modifications to the casts or rectifying, models on a computer screen that did the layup, know the custom things you can do. Same thing with products that are made by the manufacturer, being able to go and do an experience tour of their facility and see how they make it, because it's a synergy between the provider and the manufacturer. We always said garbage in, garbage out. We got a really bad cast mold and had a really bad starting point. How are you going to make a brace that fits like a glove? And I will tell you that simple things like completing an order form completely, giving patients height, weight measurements, activity level, all those things, they matter. When you get an order form and it says M. Smith and you don't know if Mary is 40 years old or 80 years old, you know, I mean, puts a manufacturer in extreme disadvantage to not really be able to visualize in their mind, who's this patient? What's their goals? What do they look like? So other things that really can play into equations, fabrication, you know, location, you know, some people like to buy from facilities that are closer to them. Shipping costs are less because it's not coming from California all the way to New York. There's a lot of different things that can go into those types of decisions. Warranties and return policies. You want to have, you know, almost everybody's got on, you know, composite AFOs at maybe a 1-year warranty. Some do 2 years. The reality is, if you're a good customer, you could have a highly active patient who's been wearing a product for 2 years and it fails. And if you've got a good relationship, that company should stand up and do the right thing if you're consistently buying products from them and you just happen to have someone. We had a guy that kept breaking custom AFOs, and we found out that he was a garbage truck driver, and all day long he was jumping from 4 feet off the ground in a pair of bilateral AFOs, and we kept having to replace these things. We finally said, why is this guy breaking them? They said, oh, by the way, he jumps out of a garbage truck, he's driving and walks around the back, and he does this all day long. And it's like, well, no wonder. That's not your normal patient. So the other thing I think is valuable is field reps. You know, customers that have field reps that have internal technical support, where you're not talking to a customer service person who's looking at some syllabus and really doesn't know what they're doing. I think that, you know, clinical educators, when you can call a company and they've got CPOs on staff or podiatrists on staff, I think that's always helpful. And again, gaining preferred status, those things are all important. When you're a medical provider, obviously there's a plethora of options out on the marketplace. And there can be a lot of reasons why you buy from a particular manufacturer, or you may choose to buy from multiple manufacturers. One manufacturer make like one product you like, another one make something else. You know, and I talk about the case of buying direct versus buying from distributors, you know, and I'll get into that a little bit more detail in a few minutes. But the reality is, you as the customer get to choose who you work with. And sometimes it could be you really like a sales rep. You really like the customer service provided by a manufacturer. You like their product lineup. You know that you can buy custom off the shelf. You can buy 15 different AFOs from that company, you know, and it's nice to know that they have a range of products that meet the diversity of the patients that you're treating. When you talk about things like price, you know, and especially for providers, you know, the biggest challenge that you face, and I hear out in the marketplace today, is that you spend more time trying to get paid than you spend time spending with your patients and doing the right thing for your patient, and having to look at what is their health plan, what's their deductible, and having financial factors, you know, that have to enter into the equation. And that's not, you know, an easy thing. And, you know, we all have to have margins, whether you're the manufacturer, distributor, provider, we all have to operate profitable businesses. We have to monitor our cash flows. We have to monitor our labor costs. We have to monitor material costs. And these are all things that sometimes, you know, there may be a product you'd really like to do, but for this particular patient, this is what you may be able to afford to do. And we all want to do what's best for the patient in every scenario. But the cost and the margin gap is something that's really hard. It's a difficult time for all providers today. When I got out of college in 1983 and DRGs were first being introduced, and I'm in California, and capitated payment plans started coming in, everything, you know, prior to that, the longer the patient stayed in the hospital, the more money the hospital made. And when I got to Townsend, we weren't offering discounts to anybody. You know, there were 3 customers that had gone to Northwest O&P school with Northwestern University O&P school with Jeff Townsend, the owner, and they were getting a 5% discount off the list price. And now price has become a big part of the selling equation, purchasing scenarios, and decision points for providers out there. And because you obviously have to be looking at, how do you close that gap between what it's cost you and what you're getting paid? And I could talk, you know, a lot about those different scenarios, but at the end of the day, you've got to manage your own business. And AFOs in some clinics can be a very, I wouldn't say very profitable, but certainly you can make margins on AFOs if you manage your costs, manage your inventories, manage your labor, things like that. Talking about national distributors, obviously the market leaders, SPS, Cascade, Pell, is national, but also has a real strong regional presence in the Midwest. Jeff Collins at Cascade, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. SPS has a lot of high caliber people. Mike Sotak at Pell, I mean, all good people offering good services. How do distributors make money? They, out in the marketplace, when you're buying a product, you may be getting a discount directly from the manufacturer. You may be getting a discount from the distributor. Discounts pretty much get the lowest price point from the manufacturers. They have to. Back in the day, maybe they were getting a 15, 20% off of list price. Nowadays, especially more than as much as anything, it's not the cost of the product, it's the cost of shipping. You go and try to ship a product directly on your own if you don't have any status with UPS, and look at what you're paying for to ship a box across the country today. And so distributors, they have to buy at a price point where they can afford to stock it on their shelf, they can afford to put it on in a box, and they can afford to ship it oftentimes for free, because that's one of the key reasons why some entities purchase from distributors, because they get free shipping, and shipping costs is a big part of the overall cost. So they are all about the scenarios. When I say that one of their risks, the last bullet point, what are their risks? One of the worst things that for a distributor is sometimes when you're just ordering one item. They love it when you're ordering 8 items and they can all go in the same box. And that's where you get the economies of scale. You get to be able to order a variety of products that all goes in one box to one location. If you're ordering just one item, that ends up costing the customer more, because at some extent it costs them the same amount to process his order for one product as it does in order for 5 products. The achieving status, for the most part, if you're buying some products from SPS and some from Pell and some from Cascade, you may have some status with all of them, but the more you buy from one player out in the marketplace, the discounts sometimes are based on volume. The more volume you're buying from a distributor, perhaps you may be getting better pricing. The distributors, if, to some extent, I think they'd tell you they don't care what AFO you're buying. They can't show bias towards any manufacturer. They may have a little bit more margin with some than the others, but they're not pushing it. They want you to buy from them. Cascade wants you to buy from them and not from SPS. Pell wants you to buy from them and not from SPS or Cascade. It's all part of, you have to make the decision as the customer, but they really are not out there promoting particular products. They're promoting a service, and they want to deliver that service on time. They want the ordering process to be as easy as possible for you, the invoicing process. And so, the benefits of buying from a distributor is they are catalog sales. I mean, and to some extent, you can go there and you can buy, it's one-stop shopping, and all of these distributors offer that service to you. And I'd say they're all really good to work with. You just may decide at some point in time that you choose this one over this one. All I can say is the more you buy from one, potentially the better pricing you're going to get from that distributor. And I can't speak for them, obviously. I just, I know how things kind of work out in the marketplace. The other risk for distributors, I'll say really quickly, is returns. One thing, I'll give you an example. You have a patient and you don't know if they're a medium or they're a large, and you really didn't measure them the last time they were there before they walked out the door. And so you decide to order one of each. And then you fit them with the one, and then you end up returning the other one. Those are the things that end up costing distributors money, because they're going to have to reprocess that. Can they put it back in inventory or not? Has it been out of the box? Does it come back in the original packaging? All those things. So let's go to the next slide real quick, Rich. I want to talk about the future real quick here. AI, everybody has different opinions about AI. I am never going to be the AI guru. I'm 65 years old. Rich had to teach me how to share my screen. It's like, but I will tell you that AI, I've been learning some about AI and out in the O&P space. And there's a couple companies out there in the O&P space. And all I can tell you is that, there's a lot of fear about, among workers about, are they going to lose their jobs? Are they like me and going to have a hard time acclimating to AI? all I can tell you is AI is here. It's going to get stronger. And one thing I will say that I've learned is, make sure that whoever you're aligning yourself with has your data and the patient data is protected. If somebody says to you, "Oh, we encrypt the data," I would tell you that's buzzwords, because encrypted data is not the same as having certificates from outside entities that stipulate that they've gone in and done an audit of your security system, of your website, and that of the AI provider's website, to document that they in fact are going to protect your patient's data. And you want to be working with a platform that really meets the needs, that understands the flow of patients, whether that's an AI platform for physicians and for podiatrist offices and for rehab. But there are a couple tools out there that are in the O&P space. And I would just say, when you're vetting those options and learning about those options, make sure you ask specific questions and be wary of the word encrypted. As far as regulatory headwinds, man, I mean, I could go on and on about that at AOPA, at the AOPA board. There's a lot of stuff, of course, that we, talk about and discuss. The evolution of split codes, which kind of started with knee braces and spine braces, and wondering where it's going next, because they've announced the next round of competitive bidding. And truth be known, if you ask me, the government doesn't care about whether the most qualified provider, a certified orthotist or a podiatrist, is fitting a product. They are totally comfortable with the concept of brace in a box being shipped directly to the patient's home if it saves them money. And it's such a travesty, if you ask me, to patients, for them to be expected, especially older patients, for them to be getting something that comes to them at their home in a box with instructions. And we see this with, now in days with spine braces and with OA braces, but you never know where they're going. They are expanding, and they're even talking about only making, instead of with the last round of competitive bidding, where there's providers across the country that were awarded contracts, they're looking at going to maybe 7 or 10 national providers. And we're not talking about O&P facilities, maybe a hangar, but you're talking about Walmarts and Amazons and those types of companies, because it is literally going to be, products that are shipped in a box. And those companies that are doing those, they are not looking for the best product out in the marketplace. They're looking for the one that they can buy the cheapest, that may be this most easy for the patient to fit on their own. And these are things like same and similar. Man, what a hard thing that is for providers. Somebody literally can be fit with a walking boot in an emergency room and then not qualify for an AFO because the concept of same and similar, and the mandatory useful lifetime. Who decided that these products should last 5 years? It certainly isn't someone who's out there in the marketplace. Certainly for some low ambulators and things like that, that's potential. But somebody who's using a product every day, that it's actually going to last, what's that thing really going to look like 5 years from now? So I think that, we all have to be conscious, always be aware, even if you don't think it's competitive bidding is applying to you today. Be aware of what's going on with competitive bidding, trying to predict what's coming down the road, because audits, those types of things. Again, you may find that some of these AI programs can help you with the audit stuff. I mean, being able to automatically generate letters of medical necessity that hit all the keywords, that hit all the information you need to have, all these different things. There is some positive things about consistency, because even within your own practice, some of your own staff may not be consistent in their documentation. You see that a lot, like in the PT world. You got some people that are great clinicians, but they're not good documenters. And so you always have to be kind of aware of how do you make sure that you are doing everything you need to do to get paid and to keep your business viable. Finest thing I'll say, market consolidation obviously is a key thing. You see how many independent O&P facilities there were in the United States 10 years ago, and how you've got a lot of players out there. The number of, the most targeted facilities out there have been those companies that have maybe 6 to 15 locations. Maybe they, more attractive if they're doing more prosthetics and orthotics. but the market continues to consolidate. You see that with hospital systems and how many hospitals own physician groups now and ancillary providers, these integrated delivery networks and things like that. The world is always changing for us, whether you're a manufacturer, your provider, or your distributor, and you just have to stay on your game. And I just always encourage you to just, read and be knowledgeable about what's going on in the marketplace. Rich, how was that?
That was great, my man. That was great. Always a pleasure to have you, and grateful to see you. We'll stop sharing. I'm going to bring back. I brought up Eric, not myself. See, sometimes even I have technological difficulties. You know what I mean? Just really absolutely great. I'm going to turn it over to you, Eric, once again. To sort of drive the discussion. We got about 10 minutes or so, but you guys really killed it. I mean, you just really, all of you crushed it, and I can't express enough gratitude for your support. So I'm going to go backstage and leave it up to you, E.
Cool. Appreciate you, Rich. Thanks, Rick. As always, great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Nicely done. Dr. Brown, amazing. I have a question for Dr. Brown and then one for Rick. Dr. Brown, can you talk a little bit about when rehab and training should start? Should that be a handoff between orthotist to therapist, or is this a continuum of care starting with the delivery?
This is a continuum of care starting in acute care. I was that therapist that did the care map on the neuro 4th floor back then at DeKalb Medical Center when we didn't have an inpatient rehab unit, and we needed to start therapy rehab then and there. And so at that point, I was calling the orthotist, do you have an off the shelf? Can you bring something in? I need to stabilize the ankle. I need to get them up and standing in balance. So it starts immediately depending on where you are in the continuum of care. So I'm doing a team approach no matter where I am. Team approach, it starts immediately. To me, there is no handoff. It's a communication going back and forth. This AFO is working. This is not working. When they get to the next place and when the insurance company will pay, which we know now is after discharge from inpatient rehab, preferably during the outpatient or home health, we need this type of brace. There is a potential for this person to improve this way. We need to accommodate the brace for that when it happens. And going back to what Rick said, I have braces that don't last 6 months. I have braces that last for 5 years. It varies on the lesion location, the amount of impairment, and time without oxygen in which other parts of the brain were damaged. So it all varies. Person, task, environment. Those things impact the lasting ability of an AFO. I don't care if it's a carbon fiber or plastic.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll address the question in the chat first before I move to you, Rick. Is there a preference difference between young amputees who lost the limb to injury versus older amputees, mostly diabetics with neuropathy? Trulife AFOs are popular among younger athletic people who are staying functional. Older patients are concerned about balance and stability. True and true. So what we're finding, if your amputation was service related or your, let me put it this way, we're seeing far fewer field amputations, and we're seeing far more field surgical technique that is salvaging the limb. However, the limb is not necessarily great. It could be a very painful way to load the limb. They saved the foot, but might have impaired or compromised gait or increased pain in some way. So I would say if I understand your question correctly, those sorts of orthopedic trauma, insult, limb salvage kind of cases require a much more robust type of composite AFO. The Trulife and their family and other manufacturers would be more appropriate for somebody with just maybe a foot drop, and they wanted their toes not to drag on the ground, but it would not be appropriate for a balance or stability or something to really lean your body into to reduce the amount of force or load through the ankle. So I hope I answered your question. But Rick, amazing overview of manufacturing and some of the inside thought behind the companies that we're working with. What I'm hoping you would expand on a little bit is what we see in Europe and other countries where there's a much more modular state of composite AFOs, where there is additive manufacturing, 3D printing of a foot plate married with composite strut designs and things. So it becomes a marriage of a manufacturing part that could be pre-made to a custom part. Where do you see that entering the U.S. market?
Yeah, I mean, 3D printing. I mean, I remember, being at a conference, one of the first leadership conferences for AOPA, and Hans-Georg Nader standing up and started talking about 3D printing and how it was still years away from being at a point where it'd be affordable and durable enough. Now it's there. I mean, when you look at additive manufacturing, you look at 3D printing, and like you said, you as an organization like Hanger, I mean, you may want to just buy a strut from one entity and buy a foot plate, or be able to 3D print those parts or your own. Somebody could be modifying, something in one location and then just sending it to the central fabricator who has the 3D printing. Small clinics and facilities, they may be able to buy 3D printers, but to really cost justify it, you got to be doing high volume. So I think that when you really look at in the United States, well, some people can make stuff on their own. I would say that, it's still, when you really talk about the most emerging cutting edge technology, because that's one of the scary things about 3D printing. You could invest in a device today that could be outdated 3 years from now. And so, how do you get the return on investment of that capital equipment that you're purchasing? So I think that definitely 3D printing, both not just structurally, but cosmetically, has come a long way. I think it's definitely an option. It may, in some situations, may not be less expensive, but certainly, again, if you're a volume provider and you're able to nest 50 parts into the printing box, as opposed to you're printing 3 items instead of 50, economies of scale. That happens the same way with the raw materials, because material selection is also really critical, and it's scary. I will say that when you try to look at some people putting a product that they've made in their shop, that's a one-off, it's a one-off, and the structural integrity, there hasn't been any testing. Are they doing 3 million cycles testing of those things? Those are the things manufacturers have to do, because they're not going to risk the liability of putting a product out on the market that's going to fail. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, 3D printing, I think additive manufacturing, I think you're going to continue to see that blossom in the US, Eric.
Yeah, we're really actively exploring that space within Hanger, for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Brown, we have one question left. Time for one more. To the physical therapists in the audience, Dr. Brown, would you give some advice on how they might enter the orthotic and prosthetic training world if they're not currently seeing them? So billing the CPT codes for specific gait training for O&P.
The first thing I would do is understand the issue that you're having, because your diagnostic code is different from your treatment code. And thereafter, once you've gotten the orthotic device, how is the intent to use it forever? Or if your client has the potential to improve with the support of the AFO, do you know how to train within that AFO and without it? Because again, you want to get them to the most least restrictive device. Eric, I've gotten so many AFOs and I go back in 6 months, I say, can you trim down this part? They don't need it anymore. Their calf muscle is working. Can you shave down the lateral wall because they're not rolling out anymore? I've facilitated the posterior tibialis so it can work eccentrically during the midfoot loading. I've gotten mobility at the navicular. So I think the therapists, we need to do a better job at understanding gait and how the muscles work isometrically, concentrically, and eccentrically, and work those nuances at the body structure function level. But don't forget about movement, postural adjustment, anticipatory and reactive postural control during functional activity. Because we want people to participate in society. The brace is already an issue. The ladies here in Charleston don't want to wear it when they have their sundresses on and they want to wear a sandal. So first of all, I got to get the right looking brace for them, as well as make it fit and function. And am I going to walk again? Well, you walking now. I need to improve your walking, but I need to work with the orthotist. And so I really think, and this is just my experience, oh, you need to go fitted for the brace. Your appointment is set up with hanger. And then the person shows up there. No information from that has been given to the CPO, who's quite competent and can look at gait and do, but they don't do the nuanced testing that we do. So for therapists who want to get into that space, you need to know and own your craft. And don't be afraid to communicate with your CPO. I know it takes an extra time. Go ahead and send them the $10 gift card for coffee because you're going to take up their time. But communication is the key.
Yep.
Communication is the key. Know and own your craft. Reach out to your CPO. Start communicating. This is what I'm finding. What do you suggest? Teamwork.
Love it. Love it. Hear, 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 hear. Rich, we're out of time. Do you want to close us out?
Absolutely. You know, I don't know what to say. I'm actually speechless. This was just an incredible morning of learning. Once again, a big shout out to all of our presenters. You guys knocked it out of the park. And Rebecca Stack and Spencer Keene this morning. Also, a big thank you to Trulife for their support. Brian and Josh, you guys crushed it in the Lunch and Learn as well. And, you know, to our 163 plus attendees that are still on, I am so grateful and appreciative for your support of everything we do educationally. It's humbling. It means a lot to me. Yeah, I don't know what to say. CME, I know we're going to get the texts and the calls and the emails about CME. You don't have to worry about CME. We will send you a link to download your certificate. If you don't get the link, say by, what's today, Saturday, by Monday at the latest, reach out to me. But we have it already set up and ready to go. So you'll get that. For ABC, okay, we submit your email to ABC so that they can apply the credits to your account. So and that takes them 30 days. So we submit after this event. My buddy Glenn Castle, who I believe is on, will submit the email list of the attendees to ABC and make sure that gets applied for pedorthics and for orthotists and prosthetists. So we have that covered. If you're a physical therapist and you're on, we can send you a certificate of completion that you can then submit to your state board and obtain credits that way. So we have you covered on all fronts. And thank you, Jennifaye. Here we go. See, yes, Glenn, ABC will credit your account. So we have that covered. If you don't see it in your account within 30 days, reach out to us and we'll take care of that. Our next event, in case anybody wants to know, right? We have like 9 events this month. So it's a definite busy month for us. But we're super excited to bring to you On the 10th, June 10th, so this week, we have Wound Talk with Wendy Cole. And then on the 13th, we have an MIS arthrodesis conference as well for surgeons. So I'm done. Have a wonderful Saturday. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And take care. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, I'm still live. Yes, Jane. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate you and appreciate our collaboration with Trulife. Listen, I do have a poll up there. Since we're still live, I do have the poll up there. You know, if you'd like somebody from the Trulife team to reach out to you, please click yes. It's right on the screen. You know, feel free to do that. Let us know. It's important. We don't waste anybody's time, but we also want to give you the information that you're looking for. So please feel free to click on, learn more about the PACE line of AFOs. I think it's pretty incredible. They're an amazing company to work with. I've had the opportunity of working with them for quite some time. And this year we have a lot of exciting educational opportunities. We're actually doing a reimbursement, AFO reimbursement masterclass, we'll call it. But seriously, if you'd like to, you know, someone from the team to reach out to you, please feel free to click on that poll question and let us know. Clarence, thank you. Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to say that one. Narathorn, thanks, my friend. Teresa, thank you. Brian, Jane, of course, you already know. Brent, Glenn, I appreciate you, my friend. Always good to have you in my as my right arm, man. It's truly an honor and a privilege to work with all of you. But yes, please feel free to click on that poll question. I'm going to leave that up for a little bit. Check out the booth. Check out the lounge, you know, connect on social media. If you want to know everything we're doing, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn. I post a decent amount so you can see everything that we have coming up. We have just a ton and more coming. So if you have ideas and if you have suggestions for conferences, we're always open for that as well. So we really want to hear what you're looking to see, what you'd like to learn. If you know of any speakers, feel free to, you know, connect us with them. If you know of any manufacturers that can use an environment like this to share incredible educational conference information, content information, please feel free to let us know as well. But I'm just so grateful and appreciative of all the support that you guys give to everything we do. And once again, a big shout out and thanks to Trulife for their support. I'm shutting it down. Peace. Have a great Saturday.